Hello everybody and welcome to the first unit in the Wellbeing at Work module. My name is Fran Cousins and I'm the module leader. You can see my email address on the screen there, so please do feel free to contact me if you'd like to discuss any of the module contents. There are also discussion groups up on Blackboard where you can reach me, or via email, or if you like to, we can arrange a Skype call or a phone conversation. So this week's unit content, the focus is on introducing the concept of wellbeing at work quite broadly, as well as to familiarise you with the format of the module as a whole and how it will be run. So as an introduction, each week will include a short introductory PowerPoint presentation. This will usually be about 5 minutes. The key learning objectives for you up on Blackboards. Also up on Blackboard you'll find the PDF main unit content document, and in there there'll be directions to key readings, some activities for you to do and practice points for you to learn what this means practically for you as an occupational psychologist. In terms of the key readings, up on Blackboard you'll find PDFs where appropriate for key readings and full APA references for them. And I've also put up URLs and YouTube videos where possible for the activities and practice point content. Finally, also there's a Blackboard discussion topic available for each week, which will become live each week as you've covered the unit content. And two key things to stress are, firstly, there's no PDF this week, so it's just me talking as an introduction. So this will be a slightly longer presentation this week. And secondly, module is really about interactive learning. So you'll need to complete all aspects of each unit to gain the knowledge and skills required for this module and to do well on your assignments. So we're expecting you to engage fully with the activities, complete the key readings, engage with the practice point content, and then I will also make sure that people are engaging with the Blackboard discussion topics. So firstly, to kick it off, what is wellbeing? So the concept of wellbeing has grown in popularity over the last few years, but is this actually something new? Or is well-being just a clever relabeling of traditional absence management, occupational health, and just generally good management practice? I'll give you a couple of moments now to read the CIPD definition that's up on the screen. This definition focuses on how well-being at the individual level feeds into well-being at the organisational level. As you can see from the diagram here as well, this provides the basis for the business case for promoting well-being amongst employees. We'll revisit this a bit later on. Importantly, well-being is a subjective experience, so it will mean different things to different people. So for some people, for example, well-being might mean being able to do 50 press-ups, and for others, they might derive a sense of well-being from financial security, or so on. So for this reason, well-being is linked to individuals' value systems and their priorities. It's a very broad construct that links to many other areas of psychology, and you'll see this as we work through the module. For your first key reading, and there's a link to this up on Blackboard, Dodge et al. Provide an excellent overview of the challenges of defining well-being from a multidisciplinary perspective, and they give a new possible definition of well-being. Their article links really closely to the position of positive psychology, which is something that we'll cover a bit later on in the module, and that's around well-being or health being more than simply the absence of illness. So well-being links to occupational health, and what do we mean by that? So occupational health, as you might be aware, is a discipline of medicine, and this really aims to help care for employees. It's typically found in larger organisations. They might have an occupational health department or employees around that. Their focus is very much on sick employees and preventing accidents. However, well-being on the other place is for all employees, and it should focus on supporting everyone within an organisation rather than just focusing on those who are currently unwell. Note though that I say should focus on these things and not necessarily does, and we'll revisit this throughout the module. In reality, it's more frequent for employers to start thinking about changing policies, practices, and culture when things start to go wrong, rather than as a measure to maximise well-being in the first place. So, why is well-being at work important? Well, the issues of absence management and employee well-being have become increasingly important to public policymakers over the last couple of decades for a number of reasons, and some of these are outlined in the boxes that you can see on the screen now. So, for example, health issues allied to obesity, including high blood pressure, depression, and back pain, and an ageing workforce, so individuals needing to work longer to support their retirement and fund their pensions. So, these sort of things we can see start to really bring well-being to the fore. The Department of Health Choosing Health white paper indicated the importance the UK and government places on employers as stakeholders in the provision of employee well-being. So I'm now going to read you a quote from that white paper. Many employers recognise that they have a direct interest in creating an environment that helps people make choices because of corporate social responsibility or because a healthier, more engaged workforce makes good business sense. A motivated, healthy workforce is more likely to perform well. Employers and employees benefit through improved morale, reduced absenteeism, increased retention, and improved productivity. And I think that spells out the business case for well-being pretty well. So CIPD research, for example, some of their papers from 2006, also shows that workplace well-being is rising on the agenda for some businesses as more employers recognise the benefits and the contribution that can be made by introducing workplace health and wellness policies. Now, the CIPD suggests that employers face pressure from three sides when it comes to well-being. So firstly, for themselves, as employers increasingly face costs and risks of long-term sickness and absence damaging their productivity, their growth, their retention and their brand. Secondly, employees are starting to demand that their employers help them to achieve individual well-being. And thirdly, the law and government, as I've touched on just now, policy drives employers to recognise their impact on employee health and to help their aims, so the government's aims to get more of the working population back and active in the workplace in order to boost the economy, something that's ever more increasingly important in the UK at the moment. So I'm now going to play this 4.5 minute video, which outlines the importance of well-being at work from a positive viewpoint, while recognising some of the pressures that we as employees experience in today's workplace. This video introduces some of the key concepts that we are looking at in this module, such as positive psychology and mindfulness, work-life balance, and the role of emotions in the workplace. So some things in that video I think we can probably all identify with. The second key reading in this unit looks at the business case for wellbeing and some key considerations for assessing and addressing wellbeing at work, and importantly, the role of occupational psychologists within this. So in other words, what do we have to do with it? So whose responsibility is wellbeing at work? Wellbeing does not exist in a vacuum. So, even in an organisation that might be designed to maximise wellbeing in terms of perhaps physical workspace, processes, policies, benefits, and so on, there is an onus on individuals to engage with these and to take responsibility for their own wellbeing in collaboration with their employer. So, as we'll see later in the module, also, how others interact with an individual can have a significant impact on their well-being. Therefore, as we can see from the diagram on the page now, well-being is a result of partnerships within the workplace. Nonetheless, given that much of many people's lives is spent at work, there is an expectation for employees that the company they work for will provide opportunities for them to be able to achieve well-being at work. For this to be effective, employee well-being needs to be part of a regular business dialogue and be deeply embedded into an organisational culture. Key Reading 1.3 is a case study from the CIPD's 2007 report on workplace wellbeing. It provides a good example of an organisation that has undertaken a total cultural change as a way of enhancing wellbeing and improving performance. This shows that the size and complexity of an organisation does not need to stand in the way of well-being. However, it is important to recognise that the success of Grimsby, which is what the case study is about, their well-being culture, could not have been possible without the direction and values promoted by the chief executive. So this slide looks like it has a lot of information on it, but we'll go through it together. Do not be afraid. We know that employee well-being is important and something that organisations should be attending to. That's obvious. But how can they go about measuring and understanding well-being amongst their employees? So here I'm going to spend a few minutes talking through some of the possible methods that businesses use to measure well-being in the workplace. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's just intended to give you a flavour of some of the considerations and challenges in measuring well-being at work. So we'll start with surveys. What are some of the positives of measuring well-being at work using a survey? Well, a big plus is that they are anonymous, so people may be more inclined to be open and honest without fear of retribution, although do note that sample sizes might not be sufficiently large for this to be true. So, for example, if you break down results by role and there are only 2 team leaders, then it's not really anonymous. A second positive is that surveys are relatively cost effective because they don't take as long to complete and analyse compared to, for example, interviews, which provide qualitative data. This also means that results can be easy to compare over time and benchmark against other companies using similar surveys or against your own company over time. Looking now at the negatives of using surveys to measure employee well-being at work, although quantitative data can make results easy to compare over time, it does mean that data is less rich and may not give an explanation as to why something is impacting on well-being. For example, if the survey uses a Likert scale measurement ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree against given statements, it may be possible to identify that the majority of employees disagree with this statement. I feel that the organisation is supportive of employee well-being. While this is valuable to know and helps to identify an issue, it does not actually contribute towards finding a solution. Secondly, as survey data is self-reported, it can be subject to bias. So, for example, if employees do not believe that their results are truly anonymous, or if it is not a requirement for all employees to complete the survey, then those with particularly strong opinions may choose to complete it and bias the results. Another consideration in terms of the more negative side of using surveys to measure employee well-being at work is that some questions might mean different things to different people, meaning that their answers shouldn't be directly compared, but it is difficult to know when this has happened. So, for example, the question, there is somewhere I can go to take a break at work. In a culture where taking breaks is seen to be frowned upon, so nobody actually takes a break, some people might respond positively, i.e. that there is somewhere, even though they never use it, whereas others might respond negatively. but in reality their attitudes are not dissimilar. Or questions can be interpreted to mean different things by different people. So, for example, the item, "My manager cares about me as a person." Some people think this means in a social, outside of work context, where others think this relates to in work, so these two people would answer differently to the same question. Looking now at using absence rates to measure employee well-being. The positives include that this data tends to be routinely collected by HR in large companies and so does not usually require any additional effort to obtain, which is very attractive to many organisations. Like data collected from employee surveys, absent rates are fairly easy to use, analyse and understand, and can be directly compared over time. Possible biases to do with employees self-selecting to complete surveys or interviews are not present with absence rates because the data are typically available for all employees, which is good. Looking at the negatives, however, absence rates are quite a crude measure of well-being, as they cannot capture presenteeism, which is when someone is at work but not performing to their usual standard, or people who are working hard but are very low on well-being. Again, because absenteeism is a very crude measure of well-being, it cannot measure attitude or reasons behind why an individual might be absent from work, which links to the next point that there can be any number of reasons that individuals are absent from work, many of which will relate to well-being, but many of which will have nothing to do with well-being and may just be because their car has broken down or their child is ill or whatever it may be. Looking now at interviews to measure well-being at work, some organisations may ask HR or an external individual, for example an occupational psychologist, to conduct interviews to gauge the feeling regarding employee well-being in the organisation. This typically occurs once it's become apparent that there really is a problem. In other words, interviews are probably only likely to occur if employee well-being is already poor and this has been recognised by the organisation as impacting on performance. So we'll take this into consideration as we go through the positives and negatives of using interviews to measure employee well-being at work. Some of the positives are: a massive positive for conducting interviews is that they can provide really rich, very detailed data, which can help an organisation to understand the root cause of issues to do with employee well-being, as well as possible solutions that can be co-created with employees. This level of detail and understanding is very difficult to achieve through surveys, even if employees provide written comments alongside their quantitative data. Interviews also give employees an opportunity to express in their own words how they're feeling and what they perceive is happening in the business that is impacting on their own well-being. This can be very powerful as it sends a message to employees that their voice is valuable and that their opinions matter, which can help to improve well-being in and of itself. That said, the organisation needs to ensure that issues raised are then followed up and action is taken, as otherwise this could actually be more detrimental to employees. So employees might feel that they raised their concerns and nobody cared. Finally, compared to survey questions, interviews mean that you can check that employees understand the questions that are being asked, so that differences in responses are more likely to reflect genuine differences in attitudes and opinions, rather than misunderstandings of the intended question meaning, i.e. measurement error. Some of the negatives of using interviews to measure well-being at work include that, similar to surveys, it may be that those who volunteer to be interviewed might have particularly strong opinions and therefore they may not be representative of the general workforce. In addition, with rich and detailed data comes a very time-consuming analysis process, as you'll probably know if you started doing this for your dissertation, as well as significant expertise in handling qualitative data. This means that the organisation is more likely to have to hire an external individual or an organisation to conduct surveys and analyse data, meaning that the whole process is slower and much more expensive than simpler or in-house options. Another negative is that given the qualitative nature of the data, findings are generally less comparable over time, and they may differ significantly depending on who was interviewed and at what time. So looking now at what we are going to cover in this module overall, we're going to look at work-related stress, work-life balance, career development and counselling, positive psychology, conflict and bullying in the workplace, and equality and diversity. So as you'll see, these are a really varied range of areas that we're going to be looking at, and well-being is a complex issue, and it's getting ever more complex as work environments and expectations change rapidly. Of course, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to study it, but it does mean that it can be a challenge given how many factors interact to impact on well-being. I'm going to do a unit at the end of this module on the assignment, when I will give you much more information about the assignment and what's expected. In brief, though, just to give you a heads up, I'll be looking for an integration of topics from across the whole module. So students who engage only with a few units or just do some surface learning without engaging with the activities and key readings will not be able to score highly on the assignment. So I really recommend that you try to engage as much as you can with each of the individual units within this module. This week's Blackboard discussion topic then is, to what extent do you think that employee wellbeing is the organisation's responsibility? And then you can discuss your own experiences on Blackboard. As I've said earlier in this talk, I really strongly encourage that you participate with this, as it's a great opportunity to engage with your colleagues and also with the academic staff on this subject, and really help with your learning in the module. Finally, here are some of the key references that I've referred to throughout this talk today. And to say, enjoy your key readings, and I look forward to being in touch with you soon. Enjoy the module.